George Bush can call a press conference and announce to the world that he's going to appoint common sense judges. This is a quote. I'm going to appoint common sense judges who realize that our rights are derived from God. Now, it seems to me the next sensible question by any journalist in the room would be, Mr. President, how is that any different from appointing common sense judges that realize that our rights are derived from Poseidon? I mean, it's not like someone in the 3rd century actually figured out that the biblical God exists, but Poseidon doesn't. You know, this is not data that we have. Okay, this obviously would be the last question that journalist would ever ask. We can't call a spade because because of this taboo around criticizing religion.
I suppose it is somewhat to the credit of some Christians that in the waning decades of thousands of years of slavery that were biblically mandated, some of them belatedly joined things like the American Anti-Slavery Society, stars of which were Thomas Paine, Benjamin Franklin, non-believers, right? Whereas to the last day of the Confederacy, the flag of the Confederacy said Deo Vindice, God on our side. And every justification for that slavery came from the Bible, where indeed it's not hard to find it.
We're going to take questions from the audience in about 1 minute.
We don't have absolute truths in science, unlike religion. That's the reason that science makes progress, because we can change our minds. And I think that's a really important thing, that we, as I often say, if you're a theoretical physicist, the 2 most important states to be in are either wrong or confused, because that means there's a lot left to learn. It's the central question of science, to try and understand why the universe is the way it is and make predictions about it. And to me, the fact that we've come so close to understanding the entire universe and its origins is just remarkable. I can't imagine why people wouldn't want to celebrate that and why they'd want to be afraid of that knowledge. Some people would rather that their children not know how the universe works.
A lot of people, actually.
Yeah, exactly. For fear that it will affect their faith, then no. And what a disservice to children. And in fact, in that sense, I would have to say, agree with Richard Dawkins, that in that sense, much of religion is child abuse.
Do you get...
I think.
Whoa.
Well, the Reverend L. Sharpton is another case of the damage done to society by religion, because once it was agreed by the rest of America that black people are best led by preachers, and once it was agreed to write out of the civil rights record the heroic black secularists like Bayard Rustin and the great black union leader Philip Randolph, who actually organized with the help of the United Automobile Workers the March on Washington. Once all that had been forgotten, and we decide, yeah, black people, they really love their preachers, then once Dr. King has gone, it's one succession of junk demagogues after another, all of them given the mantle because they're in holy orders. There's no fraudulence you can't get away with in this country if you can get the word reverend put in front of your name.
44% of Americans also believe that the creator of the universe literally promised the land of Israel to the Jews in his role as an omniscient real estate broker. It's clear that this belief has geopolitical consequences. This is not, these beliefs don't exist merely on Sundays. Take another belief that seemingly would have very minor consequences. Consider the Catholic belief that condom use is sinful. What are the possible consequences here? Well, we have millions of people every year dying of AIDS in sub-Saharan Africa alone. And you have, quite literally, Catholic ministers preaching the sinfulness of condom use in villages where the only information about condom use is the representation of the ministry. It seems to me that we should not, the time for respecting religious beliefs of this sort is long past.
To take the preposterous allegation that the rabbi makes that the wars of the 20th century were secular wars, the belt buckle worn by every soldier in the Nazi army that says Gott mit uns, God on our side. I don't think that was a help to you. Things were bad enough as they were. On page 70, I think it is, of Mein Kampf, Hitler says that in taking on the filthy virus of Judaism, I know I'm doing the work of the Lord, and I'm summoned by the Lord to do this work. A book, one of the very few books the Vatican didn't ban in that period, by the way. I don't think that was a help either. So I'd say, on the whole, we'd be better off without the belief either in a supreme dictator, because that leads to violence, or the idea that God takes sides in our pathetic mammalian disputes. I went with him all over Bengal. We got it down to the point where, except for a few bits of Afghanistan and El Salvador, polio was almost gone from the world. It could go with smallpox, not a small thing, done by UNICEF, a secular organization. And we nearly got, a date was announced, but we were pretty sure polio would be gone. And it spread back, because largely Muslim groups in Nigeria, and also in parts of Bengal and Afghanistan, told people, don't go get your children inoculated. It's a plot by scientists and Jews and others to sterilize Muslims. And that plus the Hajj, that plus the wonderful devotional habit of going to Mecca all the time and taking all your diseases with you, has meant that polio is back all the way across Africa now.
Well, you know, I was raised Catholic, Larry, and...
Catholic and Jewish, right?
Well, I wasn't raised Jewish. My mother is Jewish, but I never even knew I was half Jewish till I was a teenager. I was just so frightened about the Catholics and everything that was going on there in the church. And I was never, you know, molested or anything, and I'm a little insulted. I guess they never found me attractive, and that's really their loss, because...
You were
special,
Bill.
I was very special. You know, I'm shocked that people are finding out that priests are no altar boys. You know, it's the institution that really needs fixing, and of course you really can't fix an institution when it is religion, because when you say religion, immediately you can get away with anything. I mean, look what the Muslims did with women around the world. If you did that to anybody else, if it wasn't under the guise of religion, you could never get away with stuff like that. So,
you see no good in religion?
Not very much, no. I don't. I mean, as long as there are people who think that this is the only way, you're going to have wars and killing and death. I don't think the hate that comes from the Muslim world comes from religion. The hate comes from someplace deeper. But the religion gives it a noble framework to put it in.
No, well, most values of most religions are not at all peaceable. They include the toxic notion of the immortality of the soul, which means that if you kill someone, you've just sent him off to a better world. It's just a rite of passage, like a bar mitzvah or a midlife crisis. If you believe that this is the only life we have, I think that increases the value of life. Also, religions, because the religions that hold out the prospect of a future utopia, a messianic age, a kingdom of heaven on earth, often write into their chronology one last spasm of violence that brings about a perfect world and justifies violence committed as a means to that end. Religions have also sanctified authority so that the defiance of an ecclesiastical hierarchy is considered a heinous crime, hence the burning of heretics. It has licensed the maltreatment of animals, which in the Judeo-Christian tradition were put on earth for the benefit of humans. It's licensed the beating of children, since they're possessed by the devil or subject to original sin and have to have the devil literally beaten out of them. To say nothing of the treatment of homosexuality and other kinds of punishment of violations of standards of purity, sexual dress, food, and so on. So, and it's not surprising that religions have been responsible for some of the worst bloodlettings in history, such as the Crusades, the European Wars of Religion, the Taiping Rebellion in China was religiously motivated. Now, this isn't to say that religions are always bad. There have been some periods in history when some religions have done good. There was the Quaker movement, which was both pacifist and abolitionist, although they were a little late to the party because 100 years before there were already briefs against slavery by John Locke and others. And of course, the opponents of the abolitionist movement were themselves religious, and there were plenty of preachers who defended slavery, but at least that religion at that time in history can be credited with having done some good. And there are some other examples as well. So I would say that Christopher Hitchens made an overstatement when he said that religion poisons everything. That's going too far, but I think it has poisoned a lot of things.
1,000 years ago, the intellectual center of the world was Baghdad. Baghdad. Europe was busy disemboweling heretics at the time. Baghdad was open to all thought at the time, between AD 800 and 1100, around there. If you look at the advances that unfolded in that period, in that location, it includes the invention of algebra. Algebra is an Arabic word. Algorithm is an Arabic word. 2/3 of the stars in the night sky that have names have Arabic names. How does that happen? Just where did the naming rights come from? It came from the fact that at that time, huge advances in the Middle East, in Baghdad in particular, was unfolded in engineering, mathematics, especially mathematics, astronomy, navigation, physiology. And you say, well, why is that so? If you look at what was going on, they were open to all lines of thought. Jews, Muslims, Christians. There were doubters back then. Today we would call them atheists. They would all come around a table and share ideas. If you have some philosophy that's got holes in it, someone's going to find it. And you're going to challenge you on those ideas. And what happens is the conversation ratchets up. You discard what doesn't work and you keep what does. And when you do that, you make discoveries, and you make discoveries rapidly. And at the time, that period drew to a close. If you read history books, they'll typically describe sort of the sacking of Baghdad. It was a bad time for the city. And they say, oh, it all came to an end. However, the Islamic culture rose at other times later. And in those other times, science and engineering discoveries were not a part of it. So he asked, why not? You got the cultural heritage, why doesn't it show up again? And then you got to dig a little deeper from the sacking of Baghdad, and you find out there was a Muslim cleric, Al-Ghazali was his name, who was to Islam what St. Augustine was to Christianity. St. Augustine kind of laid out the rules for how to be a good Christian at the time. A lot of people were practicing it in their own way. He codified it. He was a religious scholar, figured it out according to his own read, told everybody how to behave. There's the book. You follow this, you're a good Christian. Al-Ghazali said, you follow this, you're a good Muslim. In that text included the assertion, which gained influence socially, but then politically, so then it had power of influence. In there was the assertion that mathematics and the manipulation of numbers was the work of the devil. The entire enterprise collapsed and never recovered. It has not recovered since. If you look at the number of Muslims who have won the Nobel Prize in the sciences, it's 1. Number of Jews who have won the Nobel Prize, 1/4 of all Nobel Prizes in science have been won by Jews. How many Muslims in the world? 1.3 billion. How many Jews in the world? 15 million tops. So you look at what effect the culture of discovery and learning can have on what you discover about the natural world. It's extraordinary.